Hey guys, welcome to Auddy Hotties. Today we have an episode for you called What in the Diagnosis?
What is that?
What? So we're going to be talking about kind of what happened before our diagnoses and then some crazy diagnosis stories from other people from Reddit. And yeah, just going over those fun stories. So
Sounds good.
here we go. Auddy
Hotties.
Hotties. Yeah, welcome to the Auddy Hottie podcast.
Here we are.
Hi guys, welcome to Auddy Hotties. I'm Bree.
I'm McKenna.
And today we're talking about pre-diagnosis stuff. So
All the
let's
fun stuff.
go. So I want to start today with just a normal catch up, like usual.
Okay.
So what's going on with you guys?
Um, well, I did have a funny story to share. I have noticed that my ADHD has been taking the seat a little bit more recently, and I am finding it very delightful.
Oh, a good driver's seat moment.
Most moments, mostly because I think I've been in a very serious, rigid type of lifestyle right now. I feel
Mm.
like again, just very serious, and it's just funny to see me mess up and then like find delight in it. And I say mess up, you'll hear it in the story. I traveled last weekend by myself. I went to Denver, Colorado for a class, and I called an Uber. I was staying at the DoubleTree Hotel, and like first of all, tried to figure out if I wanted to do Lyft or Uber or like try and get like a free shuttle downtown
Mm.
and like do all of that stuff. And then I was like, no, I'm just gonna do a Lyft directly to the hotel, spend the extra money, whatever. So I put in the address and I was like, oh, I'm staying at the DoubleTree Aurora. Like I had it in my mind but I didn't check my
Mm.
itinerary or anything. I just had Aurora in my mind. And I get in the lift and she was like, did you make sure that like this is the correct DoubleTree? And I was like, yeah, I didn't. So we get
Thanks
all
for
the
trying to help me.
I know obstinance much. So we get to the fucking DoubleTree Aurora, and I go to check in, and they were like, "You're staying at the DoubleTree Denver." I was like, "Why the fuck did I have Aurora in my mind?" And it turns out that my class was in Aurora, so I was at like the Aurora campus of University of
Oh.
Colorado or whatever. Anyway, so I had to like take an additional Uber over to. It wasn't like a big deal, but I just giggled a little bit on the way over, like, of course. And like I had every opportunity to check and double check. And then the next night, I had like the biggest ADHD night of my life. And I was just cracking up because it was like I had this plan where my hotel had a hot tub
Mm.
and I forgot to bring a bathing suit,
Oh, bummer.
which it happens unfortunately more often than not.
Mhm.
So I saw that there was a Walmart across the street, and but it was like a 15-minute walk from my hotel. So I was like, perfect. After my class, I'm gonna Uber over to the Walmart, get a swimsuit, and then just walk back. Okay. So 5 o'clock rolls around. It's snowing outside, surprisingly, and it
Oh,
was like 15 degrees.
oh.
But I was like, I'm gonna carry on with my plan. Why not? Get to Walmart and look around. There's no swimsuits anywhere. I asked an employee and they were like, no, it's off season. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I thought every department store would have swimsuits at all times of the year, but not the case.
Oh.
So then I was like, well, I could walk back to the hotel, even though it's like really cold, or I could Uber to a Target. And I was like, I'm going to Uber to the Target. So I go to Target, like, get a swimsuit, which
They had them.
they had them. Of course they do, because it's fucking Target.
Uh,
Which also, I just heard that we're not supposed to support them right now because of the
no.
DEI stuff, and I'm going
No.
through a very hard time
Yeah,
internally.
it's really rough.
But also, I understand,
Yeah.
like, first world problems. Um, so then, like, we're pulling into the Target parking lot. I see a PF Chang, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna have that for dinner, whatever. Get the swimsuit, go outside, and it's again 15 degrees, go over to the PF Chang's, decide I don't really want that for dinner. I just want to go home, call an Uber, and it's like a 30-minute wait for the Uber. So I was like, gosh, that's like not enough time to like order food to go, but I'm just gonna like not even worry about eating whatever. Get back to my hotel like 8 p.m. So my class ended at 5 o'clock, and I didn't get back to the hotel until
It's a little
8
long
p.m.
side quest.
Well, yeah, by the time I got back, I didn't even want to fucking go in the hot tub.
Oh no.
Like, and I was hungry. And it was just like, but all I could do was just laugh because I was like, oh my
Oh.
God, you tried at every point to make like the best decision you could, and you really couldn't think outside the box.
I'm so glad you were able to have a lot of like grace for yourself and like find the humor in that part of
You
it. Like
kind of have to find the humor at some points. And I think like in the past, like really, if I was traveling with someone else, I think I would be so self-conscious about like messing up, doing the wrong thing when really like it was fine. So I think having more mistakes like that, or not even mistakes, but having more moments like that where I'm able to just laugh about it is healing.
oh,
So
that's really good.
anyway, that was my catch up story.
Yeah. That's kind of funny that you mentioned like by yourself it being different than in the past, like traveling with people. Because
Yeah.
last night Lauren and I went to dinner and got her a little tipsy margaritas. And so I was asking her deep questions about what she would do with her life if I weren't around. But
What you do
we
when you
were
have tipsy
talking about
margaritas.
right. But we were talking about how like when we were both like single or kind of like on our own for different adventures and stuff, like there's a different kind of like confidence that you get in
Yeah.
those moments.
Yeah.
And something about like being with someone else puts that like added, I don't know if it's added pressure or what, but like
Yeah.
it takes some of that confidence down.
Yeah.
Whereas like she was saying like, oh yeah, like when I'm single, a lot of times I'm like, I'm just gonna move to this place and I don't care, like I'll try anything. And
Yeah.
so it's
I
really
totally
interesting.
it is interesting, and it's like what is that? Is that just having is that being perceived by someone else, or is it like not trusting yourself when someone else kind of like wondering if they're judging you? But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. For me, I
Yeah.
feel like it can go both ways. Like I can feel extra confident in what I do if someone's watching me and just be like, yeah, look at me. I've got this life thing down, and like I think my ADHD is hilarious. Or
I went
like,
the other way around.
oh my God, I'm like I can't do life. And yeah. Anyway.
Aw. Yeah. Well, I don't have a lot of big updates, but I have a new little thing going on with a friend slash partner. We haven't like nothing quite fits what we're doing, but his name is Mick. And we've kind of connected over that we both enjoy Latin dance and don't have a lot of
Ooh.
people to Latin dance with. Like I've never dated somebody that also danced.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll try. Like Lauren puts in a good effort, but it's definitely not like an interest of hers. So he and I kind of bonded over that. And then we definitely have some like chemistry of like flirty together and stuff. So
Yeah.
we were like, let's be like friends, but slightly more than friends, and like dance together regularly. It's like there's not really a good label for it, but it is kind of a nice like additional relationship to have together.
Yeah. And it's what you're
So
doing. And
yeah.
like who defines relationships? Y'all do.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. So we'll probably end up having him on at some point because I talked to him about it. And he's not diagnosed anything, but like has recently started suspecting a little bit more, it seems like, or at least we're pushing him in that way, I guess. But I told him we would try to make him do assessments live on the podcast, at
Ooh.
least ADHD, but we'll see.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really my updates.
Cool.
I wanted to start today with some autism in the news. Okay, so the first one that I found was just from this January about an autism detox treatment. There, so this article is busting the myth because there is pretty bad misinformation spreading, it sounds like right now.
I wonder
I haven't heard
why.
about it yet, but there's a products promising to reverse autism diagnosis by removing toxins and heavy metals from the bloodstream.
I have heard of toxic metals causing autism.
Okay.
Yes.
It's like that it's marketed especially for kids,
Yeah.
which is super dangerous. But the FDA is saying that they are not approved to treat autism, and there is absolutely no science behind it.
Wonder
Um,
why.
right. People with autism don't have a higher load of any heavy metals, and it's been tested and disproven. Um, and they don't have to be FDA approved to be on the market. Like they can just be out there and saying these things, even though it's not proved. Uh, and basically, in the past, there have been similar things that have actually found to cause kidney damage by
Yeah.
trying to remove the metals when you
Right.
don't really have a metal, whatever, excess or too little or whatever.
Metal toxicity or whatever's
Yeah,
going on.
they can cause kidney damage, and even some people in the past have died from that kind of treatment. So
Yeah.
they're just putting it out there of like, this is misinformation, and don't follow that.
Well, I know that your kidneys are in charge of like detoxifying stuff in your body anyway, so I wonder if it just puts a lot of extra stress on them.
Oh
And
yeah, I'm sure
wow.
probably.
But I have heard that before. It's actually I heard that recently within the last year. A coworker was talking about how she's seen a lot of like a surge of globally delayed kids and
Mm.
wondering if it's something in the water.
Oh.
And I was just like, what does that even fucking mean? And then I kind of went on like a deep dive and I was like, oh, people think that metals and
Mm.
are a big contributor. It's just
There's
interesting.
there's a really good lesbian movie from way, 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 way back that's called Something in the Water
Well, I must watch
with that
it.
same theory. That's why the
What
women
same
the women
theory?
are turning gay, that there's something in the water.
Oh no.
But yeah, we're
Hilarious.
with especially with RFK coming in, RFK Jr. coming in as health, what is it, health, I don't
You know
know,
what?
lead. I don't remember what his role is, but anyways, with
Yeah.
him coming in, we're gonna have to be fighting a lot of misinformation, and we're going back to square one on fighting against autism vaccines causing
Vaccine.
autism, and starting over at square one on trying to remind people that that has been disproven so much.
Which I wonder if that's going to affect your work since you work with so many families who are like you're kind of the first point of a lot of people understanding that their child might be autistic
Yeah,
or
it'll
like
be interesting to see if anybody's asking questions or
yeah.
yeah.
So that's pretty problematic.
Yeah.
Um and also it's hard to navigate. For me, sometimes it's hard to navigate those conversations. I think that as I gain more confidence in what I'm actually saying and like my education about autism, I have some things to pull back on.
Mm.
And I can also like pair that with, I think the term is nonviolent communication, but it's like using I wonder statements or
Mhm.
like, have you thought of it this way? But just because it's so, I feel so angry when people say things like autism is caused by vaccines. And it's just like, it's not proven and it's not true. But I think
Yeah.
navigating those conversations are hard.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
On another interesting note of news lately, again, another one just from this January, the 27th. So it's literally like right now, less than a week out that they've found this link. But apparently now they found that there are shared genetic factors between ADHD and cannabis addiction. I was like, oh my gosh, because I know so many people that are like are strong users of it. I wouldn't say addiction necessarily, but it's just really interesting because it's not just that they're finding like a correlation between the two. It's like they did genetic testing and are finding markers that are the same and like a lot of them.
That's weird.
Yeah. So something to keep an eye on, you know?
But how does that work? Because wouldn't cannabis be something that you have access to, whereas like autism is something that you are? Like, how does that work that there's genetic markers?
Well, I think it's the addiction component of it. So it's like they can prove like any connection to addiction through your genes. So that's why it like runs in families a lot of times, is because like if your family has a lot of addiction related genes, you can have those passed on to you. And then you are more likely. So like it's not saying that you're going to be, but it's that you're more likely to have that. So like even if I didn't have autism, if I was a carrier of autism, it's the same way. Like I'm a carrier of the addiction gene for this thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's like a broad combination of genes. I think they said it was like 33 plus genes or something like that.
Well, I know that cannabis has really helped me with both
Mm-hmm.
ADHD and autism management for sure. I had this is a funny
Oh
story.
boy.
Um,
Mm.
I was, of course, having a rough semester at grad school.
Mhm.
Wonder which semester that was.
Um,
Any six of them.
all of them.
All of them. And I was out to breakfast with my mom and dad, and I was like, I was shaking. It was really bad. Oh, constant anxiety. My dad goes, McKenna, I just have to ask, like, have you ever tried weed?
Your dad.
I was like, I really haven't, but maybe I should. And he
Oh,
was like, I think it's time. Time to find something else. So
dad's pro cannabis. Love
funny.
it.
So funny.
Uh,
So anyway.
yeah, and the study wasn't saying like that it's a bad thing or anything. They're just saying like that it
No,
was a
it's
link, which is
interesting.
really
Yeah.
intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the things that we can like find in genes now are so interesting.
See, and that's a path that I have not gone down in understanding genetics. I think that,
Mm,
I understand the concept, but how it works and how it is access versus inheritance and like what that
right.
it doesn't make sense to my brain yet. So, but
Yeah.
it's
I
fun to
think it's
learn
because
about.
it's a combination of the two,
Yeah.
right? Like if you have the gene, then you're more likely to access it. And if
Right.
you have access
Right.
and the gene, you're more
Yeah.
likely to, yeah. It's like all probability, which is crazy.
Yeah. Probability, statistics, those were not math classes that I did well in
To be fair to me neither, but
ever.
yeah. Yeah, just some interesting things that have come out in the last month. I
Weird.
can't believe how fast things come out too, like new
Yeah,
news.
I
So
know.
yeah. And I wanted to share a little bit of ADHD stuff because most of the stories that I'm sharing today are related to autism diagnosis because most of the ADHD diagnosis stories I could find were all like very similar themes. Like they were like, oh, I didn't know, but a family member or a friend or a partner pointed it out, and then I went and got tested.
Yeah.
Or I was struggling in school, and then I went and got tested. Um, or like the symptoms are just better known. So people were like, oh, I see those symptoms in media and that kind of thing. So I like went and got tested.
Yeah.
So there's just not as many like wild out there stories as there are for autism diagnosis.
Like not as many nuances.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little more straightforward.
Okay.
So there's not as many stories of that. So I wanted to include the ADHD's in there. It got its time.
It exists.
It
It's valid.
exists, yes. I did run into one cute ADHD diagnosis story. It was a person that was commenting on a thread about sharing your stories about when you got tested. And they said, I was 6. There was me, my mom, and the doctor. I was rolling on the floor. Why? I liked it. It was fun. It was really annoying when the doctor told me to quit. I suppose no testing was necessary.
I love it.
Very well encapsulates.
Very much so. Sensory seeking.
Can't sit still, all the common things, right?
Going against the power in the room.
Oppositional defiance
The
a little bit.
exactly.
Yeah.
Expectations.
Yeah. So the first story I wanted to read off of Reddit for autism diagnosis was someone who was in a cult. So that's why they didn't get diagnosed. So this
Oh.
one's coming from r/spicy autism. They say, I am a late diagnosed level 3, and here's how that happened. I wasn't diagnosed with autism until my late 30s. I was originally assessed as level 2, but within a few months was reassessed at level 3. I grew up in a cult. The cult didn't believe in things like autism. In fact, if you were different, it was because you weren't faithful enough. I was severely abused due to my autistic traits and symptoms, and that didn't force or teach me to mask because I couldn't. My parents were happy to have me tested for giftedness at 7, but not for autism. They had been told numerous times to have me formally assessed so they could help me better at school. And the gifted assessment apparently went well, and my parents were told I was highly gifted and had an IQ of 144. Fortunately, during that time, I was infrequently allowed to attend public school, depending on what the cult was doing and if they had the ability to homeschool. My teachers all knew I had autism and were very accommodating as much as they could. They'd also provide me with material from intermediate and high schools to help meet my gifted needs. My family finally managed to get out of that cult when I was 10 or 12 years old. And even at that point, I would only do subjects or topics that I was interested in. But I was really good at certain ones and was given a university scholarship for a semester to study at my top university when I was 10/11 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Every teacher, health professional, or even reasonably educated adults all told my parents I should be assessed for autism.
Hmm.
But by this stage, I was pretty brainwashed into thinking it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I already had significant support from my family in terms of being able to live. And at school, I had support because they treated me as though I had autism anyways. Later on, I was given diagnosis of severe social anxiety, depression, OCD, agoraphobia, GAD, PTSD, insomnia, and probably others, but I don't remember more than those right now. But we still refused any neuropsychological testing.
Yeah.
This largely continued into my late 30s when I was told very clearly that the professionals and support people strongly believe I have autism, um, and I need to agree to be formally assessed to continue those supports. It took some therapy, but eventually I agreed to assessment. I was assessed over several sessions and weeks, and I was told after the first session that the psychologist had no doubt that I had autism. She said she had never been so sure in someone my age, and I also needed to finish the assessment and testing. So that's how you can be late diagnosed as a level 3. There's a lot more to my story, but I struggle to think and write well enough to give it the time to tell you.
That I can relate to so hard.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, of just like there's so much I have to tell you, but like I literally can't find the words or communicate
Mhm.
it to you. Sometimes I feel that way even with this podcast of like I know what I want to say and I've prepared to say it, and then when I'm here I like think I've done my due diligence of what I want to say, but then I like ruminate when I get home of like, oh, I should have said this, not like,
Yeah.
oh, but I didn't have the access to that
Yeah.
language.
And how do you unwrap a story like that?
So true.
Like we don't have any context to know like what cult it was, what kind of things they were brought up in, like any of that. But that alone is so wild. Like I would never expect the experience. And like I don't in my head like picture, I don't know, I guess this kind of thing gives me better exposure to that people have challenges in every different environment
Oh yeah.
too. Because like I wouldn't even think about like, oh, if you're in a cult, what do you do? Like
Oh yeah,
if your
no.
kid has disabilities or something like that, like is it every disability? Is it,
Pray it
like
away and
yeah.
yeah, no. It's super interesting to think about disability within different contexts of society and just like how are they managed and like how are they approached and um I wonder if the cult do all okay, this is a stupid
Yeah.
question, but do all cults have religious base? I mean, I assume
Oh,
theirs was because it had to do with not being faithful enough.
right.
But I was just gonna say, I wonder if they, you know, thought of autism as a deviance from God or like a I have heard that it's like the devil's touch or whatever,
Mm.
which is just
Or like created by the parents' sin or something like that.
totally.
Mm.
So like is that what contributed to not wanting their kid to be diagnosed formally?
According to Google, it says no, not all cults are religious in nature. The term cult is often used to describe groups with unusual beliefs or practices and can be applied to both religious and non-religious groups.
Cool.
I'm
Thank
curious. I know
you.
there's a couple podcasts on cults, so it'd be interesting
Yeah.
to deep dive into that one a little more.
I fucking love cults. I think they're fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, but I saw a lot of similarities with like what I've heard from other folks that haven't been that are late diagnosed, such as being gifted as a child, having a slew of other diagnoses that kind of encompass what's going on without saying the word autism, such as the social anxiety, the agoraphobia.
Yeah,
So,
that was a lot of labels to be given
yeah.
to avoid the one label.
Yeah.
Let's see. So another one I saw on Reddit was this funny bingo card that's your autism was missed in childhood bingo.
Wait, can we do it?
Yeah, they're a little long, so I might just select a few that are funny.
Okay.
But I'll post the actual picture of it on Insta, and then people can go do their own bingo
Hell
card.
yeah. I'm excited.
Um, so some of them are parents suspected autism but refused to get you tested.
Mm-hmm.
Misdiagnosed with something else.
Mm-hmm. Done.
Having your issues blamed on childhood trauma or other issues.
This
Hmm.
huge.
Yep. Parents knew something was wrong but did not want you to be labeled. Have a sibling or relative with severe autism and thought you weren't because you didn't look like them.
Mm,
Maybe
I
not.
wonder.
I don't have any like siblings or family, but just like the media and stuff, like seeing what autistic people looked like.
Yeah, I was gonna say the lack of representation is so hard when you don't have it.
Yeah. Um, did academically well slash were considered too smart to have autism.
Yeah.
All children are unique and different. You're fine.
Yeah.
They did get you tested, but the doctor said it's useless to further test.
That was your test round one.
Yep.
Assessment round one.
Lived in an extremely rural slash poor slash underdeveloped area. Very rural. Had an undiagnosed autistic parent think you were normal because they acted the same way.
Yep.
Yep. My dad was definitely very autistic. He passed away when I was 18, so he's not around now to talk to about it, but from all the signs, he definitely was. But you were so well behaved.
Yes. I wonder why.
Uh-huh. Or your behavior was seen as cute or quirky as by adults in your life.
Yeah.
Or you weren't labeled with anything, but you were given IEP, special ed, gifted classes, etc. So
Interesting.
that's just some of them. There's a few more on there, but
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of those apply.
I think I would have gotten a bingo.
Bingo. So on that note, like what was school like for you? Did you like do well in school? Did you struggle in school?
Yeah, I was really successful at school, was in the gifted program from grades 3 to 5. I don't know how to say that. I was in the gifted program from third grade to fifth grade. Did really well throughout middle school and high school. I had, I was in a lot of honors classes and oh my God, what was it called? AP. AP classes. Um, but then when I got to college and I was not living under my parents' roof and I was more independent, my grades suffered a lot. And then I was not really able to be a good student. And it was interesting because I feel like the same thing happened in graduate school where I was even at like a lower level than I had been before. And it wasn't that I wasn't like learning information. It was more of like the tasks to earn the grade were really hard for me to perform. My procrastination was super high. Um, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about you?
I was kind of the same that I went to an international baccalaureate
Oh yeah,
school.
IB.
Yeah, an IB
Yeah.
school. Yeah,
Oh,
lots of honors
that's
classes
sick.
too. I wasn't an IB major. I was a dance major, but I took mostly IB classes
Hmm.
or AP or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, super high achiever, put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah.
Like I was the kid that if I got like an A minus, like that was being in trouble versus like, excelling. Um, but my little brother had a very different experience
Really.
that he was more of the pushback on school kid, like didn't seem to like click with being in a classroom and teachers and testing and all of that and um is much more he's a mechanic. He works on cars and he's got a really cool degree from a NASCAR Technical Institute. Not to brag on the little brother, but
So fun. Oh my
yeah, yeah.
gosh.
So he's really mechanically minded
Yeah.
and excels in those kind of things, but just school was not the place for him.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the same for Lauren too, of like she growing up suspected that she had ADHD. Um, and struggled a lot with being
Mhm.
interested in school, wanting to be there for classes, the sitting still portion, like
Yeah.
those kind of things.
Totally.
Yeah. Which it seems like in like Reddit world and other stories that I've heard, it kind of does go that way. Like it's either kind of the ADHD wins out and you hate school, you're not a fan, you try to get out of things, that kind of
Yes.
thing, or you're overly obsessed with excelling and I have to do it. I have to grade, and a lot of
Yeah.
times I would be doing my homework like at school,
Yeah.
I have to get it done. I have to be, the best. And
Totally. I remember doing that in math class. I like wouldn't even listen to the lesson that the teacher was doing, and I would just do my math homework and just like get it done so that it was done. like check mark. But
Did you find yourself to be bored in classes, like feeling like
okay,
you
so
needed
this
more?
is what I want to say about that. I definitely had a streak in high school about like, you know, I hate the term class clown, but I definitely like goofed off in class. And like, I remember my French teacher would just like, I could just see her blood boil when I was certain things were like, oh my
Like, I'm
gosh.
pushing buttons over here.
I pushed so many buttons, but yeah, I think it was because I was bored. I think it was because I wasn't interested.
Mm.
I think too, socializing is really hard for me.
Yeah.
So...
It sounds like you kind of went the opposite way of socializing than me, though. Like you
Oh,
kind of
really?
like were trying to stand out in a way to like distract from that, or like
Oh no,
no.
I was not trying to stand out.
Being a class clown though feels like you're like trying to get some attention and like
How do I want to say? I think I just could see how I could get it.
mm,
Maybe I was looking for attention. I don't know. I guess it was like an easy access for me. Like I
mm.
did it. Let me think about that a little bit more.
We're opening pathways of memories.
It's so funny. I'm getting together with three high school classmates tonight, and we've been like talking all weekend about like, random memories here and there. And I'm just like, I don't really remember a lot from high school.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
have a lot of memories either.
yeah, but I do remember my French teacher being really annoyed with me. But also, she said that I was one of the most empathetic people that she's.
Oh.
We went on a trip to France as part of, the curriculum as juniors. And I remember there were three juniors, and then the rest of the students were seniors. And I was a junior, and the two other juniors got to room together. And I was put with one of the seniors that, like, had no friends, and just like, she was a little weird. I don't know how to say that without being mean.
Oh.
But like, and I remember my French teacher roomed us together, and I remember coming home from that meeting crying, and then like asking her about it the next day, and she was like, "Well, I know out of the three of you, you were the most empathetic,
Oh.
and like I trust you to like be nice to her." And it's like, okay.
Oh.
But I didn't get to be with the popular French girls.
Popular.
It's just so stupid. But like, at the same time, like age appropriate,
Yeah, that's
right?
what you
Like
care
wanting
about
to
in
fit
high school.
in. Yeah.
I definitely have come into more of my own of being a little more outgoing
Yeah.
as an adult because
Yeah.
I went kind of the very opposite way and tried to like hide basically in my feelings of it. Like I would talk to different groups and like be outgoing in that way, but like
Yeah.
I didn't want the attention on me.
Yeah.
I have really strong RSD.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so everything was just like, don't put yourself out there because it's gonna like look bad and
Totally. I am more that way now.
mm.
I think I've been burned quite a few times. RSD wise to, it's something that I like to hide a little bit more now. I feel
Oh,
like I'm a little
protective
bit,
of yourself.
yeah.
Mm.
And I don't think it's insecurity. I think it's actually more security in wanting to protect myself rather than like
Yeah.
seek it
Or like you've
external
talked on previous
validation.
ones, like of like respecting your limits and wants and stuff like that more.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so the next one is more along the lines of during diagnosis.
mm,
So this thread is, what's the weirdest thing that you were asked during your assessment?
good question.
I don't think I was asked anything too weird.
I wasn't asked anything too weird, but the weirdest thing to come from my diagnosis conversation was like the doctor pointing or the psychologist pointing out that I may have a special interest in communication because I'm autistic. And I was like, huh,
Oh.
I think that tracks. Because I did my like bachelor's in communication, and then I went back to school for speech language pathology. And
Mhm.
yeah, during our conversation, I was like, maybe I have taken an interest in it because I'm like, it doesn't come naturally to me. And he was like, I think that could be right.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
Um, the first person's said that they were asked if it takes 40 minutes to make 60 cakes, how long does it take to bake 120 cakes?
Wait, what? Say that like, oh, auditory processing.
Uh,
Challenging.
if it takes 40 minutes to make 60 cakes, how long does it take to bake 120 cakes?
80, but do you have access to all the ovens? And like, do you have
This
timers?
is exactly a perfect example of where
Really?
this comment goes. Yeah, they were like, obviously, I know that the stupid answer is 80 minutes.
Right.
But the problem with that is it's stupid to expect anything in baking to work like that.
Yeah.
Like it depends on so many variables to make a specific cake.
Yes.
You'd have to know like what the downtime in the process. Um, you'd have to know like does the oven heat the same?
Yes.
Like
Well, and it's like, can't you put all of the cakes technically into one oven? So then it would really be 40 minutes.
oh, there you go. Depends how big your oven is. We don't know.
We don't
How
know.
many pans do we have? That's exactly where they were going, was like reading too far into the
Cool.
question and not just answering the stupid question.
Autism.
Yeah. And then this one, it's like there's a lot of questions that they ask about like social cues and like what does this mean or like uh yeah, like silly things like that. But this one says the old man doctor winked at me and then asked if I knew what that meant.
Ew.
Vomit face.
What does it mean? Leave immediately.
Yeah, you were a perv.
Yeah. Ew.
Me, you can't blink correctly.
That's funny. Ugh.
Let's see. Another one was somebody that was asked, "What would you think if someone didn't show up at a party when they said they were coming to it?"
Say that one more time. Sorry.
What would you think if someone didn't show up to a party they said they were coming to?
Um, they're mad at me.
Again, exactly where this is going. So they said that they got in an accident or they died. And the
Yes.
examiner was like, "Wait, what? Why?" And they're like, "Because why else would they not show up and not tell me? It means they can't. So they're either in the hospital or dead." And then proceeded to list all the possible reasons someone could possibly not show up, ending it with, "Well, it could also be that they didn't want to come, but that makes no sense. They wouldn't have accepted in the first place, and they would have told me."
Oh, interesting.
It's like the assuming the best of people
Yes.
issue.
Yes.
Anything else that you wanted to share about like before the diagnosis for you?
So before I was diagnosed with ADHD, what I noticed is that there are so many cisgender women that identify with having ADHD.
Hmm.
And then when like before I was diagnosed with autism, there were definitely like not as many women.
Hmm. Identifying with and
Yeah, and it was a lot more either like non-binary folks or people in the queer community identifying with autism. And it's just interesting as my gender identity has kind of like it has correlated with my neurodivergent
Hmm.
diagnoses.
Oh, interesting.
It is very interesting.
Mhm.
So I don't know if like that's something that's a phenomenon that other people have seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely high correlation
Yeah,
that I've heard of as far as like the numbers of people that are queer or
sure.
gender nonconforming or any of those things that
Yeah,
fall in that same category, like the Venn diagrams in the
yeah,
middle.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, and now that I'm thinking about it too, when I was going through my ADHD diagnosis, there was a lot of deficit based language and a lot of being messy and a lot of, you know, being distracted. Whereas when I was going through my autistic diagnosis, it was more of like a burnout.
Mhm.
And I quite literally can't do any of the things that I used to do, or like the things that I used to do are a lot harder. And
Oh, yeah, like they talk about like late diagnosis, especially causing a skill regression
yes,
and ability regression after,
yeah,
which I've definitely experienced too.
yeah,
Yeah. And I'm definitely just struggling more with like executive function and like keeping up with life and those kind of things. It was a struggle before too, but like now, and I don't think it's just because I'm aware of it, but like the accommodations have allowed me to kind of like change how I see the world.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it could have to do with a little bit of awareness, but it also could just do with also where life is meeting you too. And like, as you grow older, you gain more independence.
Yeah, so since we're talking before the diagnosis, was there anything as a kid, like if they asked you on your assessments, like did you think you were a normal kid or like what stood out as a kid that was different for you?
Mhm. Yes, so they did ask me, and I actually connected it to my special interests and
Mhm.
looking at like how much I loved Disneyland.
Yes.
And also being a gifted child. And I also connected it to echolalia
Mhm.
and, listening to songs on repeat. Actually, I just had this conversation with my dad a month ago,
Aw.
but I used to listen to um Shania Twain's Honey, I'm Home song just on repeat at a certain phase of my life. And I was like, Dad, do you remember that? And he was like, Yeah, I do.
It was like it was a
I'm so
rough time for
sorry.
me.
He's the most patient person I've ever met.
Aw, that's sweet. Yeah, I definitely relate to the special interests like we just talked about in the last episode. And like I think that got missed in a large part because it was like the stereotypical girl interest. Like I was so obsessed with
Totally.
horses
Horse girl.
and horse girl all the way. Every game I had was a horse game. Um,
Like horse monopoly and stuff.
oh, anything that was themed horses. But I mean, like I had like Playmobil, and I specifically got the ones that were like the horse Playmobil groups, or like
Obsessed.
my Legos. I always made the horses out of Legos, and like just every game I had
Obsessed.
was about horses. Yeah,
Horse girl.
horse girl. So I think that got a little missed because I like, oh, it's a special interest, but you're the same as every other girl or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and then also ice skating was
Mhm.
my first special interest.
Yes. Christy Yamaguchi.
Christy Yamaguchi at 2 years old, and I begged my mom until I was 6. um, and with ice skating, it was one of the only like sensory things I really remember. Because like you for high school, I don't
Mm.
remember a lot of childhood stuff. Like it's I don't know where it is, but it's not in my head.
Yeah.
Um, and but I vividly remember having to fix my socks, the seam of my ice skating
Yes.
tights, like over and over and over. And like sometimes it would take me like 30 minutes. And I definitely have the like skin sensitivity, autism
Hmm.
sensory problems. And I still to this day, like I have to change clothes like sometimes not at all, and sometimes like 10 plus times to
My
get an outfit that is
goodness.
okay for the day.
Yeah.
Mm,
That sensory avoidance. Yeah.
yeah.
Makes sense.
And then with being homeschooled too, like
Hmm.
I didn't get caught for a lot of those reasons because I didn't have to sit still and I was able
Right.
to do kind of whatever I wanted to. And
Did you ice skate every morning or something like that? Or like, did you ice skate?
from like 6 on, I
Yeah.
skated like every day at like set times, but in the summers we had like summer camps that were like 6 to 8 hour
Oh,
camps per day doing like off ice, on
yeah.
ice training, strength training, dance, like all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. You know what's funny is I was putting on my little socks for ice skating because they're basically like the feet of tights.
Okay, yeah.
And they go up to here and they have a seam at the bottom. And so I was putting them on the other day and I was like, huh, Bree used to like spend extra time straightening this out. I think you said that in the last month.
Well, it's a good
It's
thing
like I'm
that
just like Bree.
it's a good thing sensory sensitivities aren't contagious. 'Cause you
I know,
think
I was
about it
like,
and then you're
does
like,
this bother me?
no,
I'm okay.
I'm okay. Yeah.
So funny.
But yeah, since we hadn't had time to cover other people's stories, since our diagnosis stories ended up taking more than we expected during our chats about them, I wanted to share some other people's stories and some crazy things that have happened with diagnosis. So if you have a fun diagnosis story or pre-diagnosis childhood stories, please write them into us. We would love to read them, share them if you're open to it.
Or even if you are pre-diagnosis and
Mhm.
want to share some of your thoughts listening to the podcast of like,
Yeah.
maybe it's me too.
Yeah, because like I said, a lot of times it is the people around you that help you identify some of those things and like accept that that could really be true. Like Lauren said, I could share that she knew she was probably ADHD before we got together. Um, But then, and she was aware of autism and like the link with ADHD, but not really like that it could be her. And like we got together and I was basically like, you're like the exact same as me. Like you have look at this thing and this thing and this thing. And I wasn't like pushing her for it, but she took her first like autism assessment. It's like since we've been together and like all this stuff. And now it's like pretty much like, yep,
Flying colors.
yep, got it. It turns out that all matches. Yeah.
Amazing.
But she's chosen not to pursue diagnosis because she just feels her self-diagnosis is valid and especially with the state of the world right now, doesn't really want to add like to the medical record kind of thing. And it
Yes.
won't really change anything since she has me as like self-validating too. And
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Mhm.
I know we've talked about how we've both been medically diagnosed, but or I should say, and self-diagnosis is just as valid, if not more.
Yeah.
I definitely, yeah.
Which if you get out there in the Reddit community for autism things, just be aware some Reddits are anti self-diagnosis.
Oh,
I definitely like got onto the couple of those on accident and was like, oh my God, like this is so hateful and awful. Like what is going on? So just keep an eye out. Like there's a big community of people who I don't know why, but they're anti self-diagnosis. So we are not that way. We believe that self-diagnosis is valid, and
pro
if
self.
there are supports that help you, use them.
Absolutely. Show
Yeah.
up for yourself. Find your joy.
And be unapologetically you. Thanks for joining us this week on Auddy Hotties.
Have a good week.